Good Boisai. Welcome to all the guests. Zog the Mishnah. Familiar stuff, Rabbi Isai. Familiar stuff. Ha-Pesach v'achatos shchotam shloi l'shmon. If you shecht a carbon Pesach and chatos, that's the first Mishnah, that those two are the exception to the rule. If you have a shloi l'shma, you think about another carbon while you're shechting the carbon Pesach during the shechita. And here the Mishnah adds, Kibel, Vihilach, Vizarak. If you did the other three avodas, which is Kabbalah, receiving the dam and klisharis, Vihilach, and you walk it over to the Mizbeach, Vizarak, and you throw it onto the Mizbeach, Shaloi Lishman, and you had intent for another carbon, Oy Lishman v'Shaloi Lishman. Even if you started out on the right foot, but you messed up in the middle, Oy Shaloi Lishman, you started off wrong, and then you did tshuva, and you went to Lishma, Psulim, it's too late. Once you go to Shaloi Lishma, even afterwards, or certainly in the beginning, you start off Shaloi Lishma, possibly. What do you do with it? You got to destroy it. What's a good case? L'shem Pesach. He started off L'shem with the right kavanah to carbon Pesach. L'shem Shlamim. Then he turned all of a sudden. He switched it up to Kayin and he went to Shlamim. Shaloi Lishman v'Lishman. What's the case? L'shem Shlamim. You start off terribly. You have a carbon Pesach and you start off on the wrong foot. And then, it's a Pesach. L'shem Pesach. Too late. Apostle. Zevach nifsal b'arba dvarim. The carbon is puzzled with the four avodas, and that we're going to see later a little bit more. B'shchita, u'bekibul, u'behiluch, u'bezrika. Yeah, kind of repeats itself. You can puzzle shaloi l'shma during any one of the four avodas. Rebbe Shimon, machsher behiluch. We had this. We're familiar with this. He says no. One out of the four is hiluch, walking it. He says, you need a shecht animal. You need to receive the blood. You need to throw the blood on it, but you don't have to walk. What if you shecht it? What if you're shechting it right next to the mizbeach? So therefore, it's not a necessary avodah hiluch, and therefore, since it's not necessary, if you mess up with your thoughts during the hiluch, it doesn't ruin it. If he's actually, he needs to walk. Why? Because he shechted it far away from the mizbeach, so he must walk. Then the halacha, during the halacha, you have the wrong thought, you passel. But if it's in a situation where you don't have to walk, you're right next to the mizbeach, you decided to walk, whatever it is, that's not a halacha, that passes. Says the Gemara, V'kabbalah mi pasla. When you receive the blood inside a vessel, could you have intent that it's not a shlamim, that it's not a carbon pesach, it's a shlamim? V'tanya, v'krivu zeo kabbalah sadam. So we have in this pasuk, we already saw this pasuk, now we're going to learn it slightly different than we learned before. We have two words here, v'krivu and v'zarku. So the word v'krivu cannot mean zrika. You want to say v'krivu means zrika, great, but in the same pasuk it says v'zarku, so it can't be the same word. So what could it be? It must be the step before zrika. What's before zrika? Either halacha or kabbalah. Halacha is not that important, we said, so let's stick with kabbalah sadam. V'krivu is kabbalah sadam. Atoimer kabbalah sadam, oyeno zrika. Perhaps v'krivu means to make the blood go closer to the mizbeach. And how do you do that? Through throwing it. Kishuayim v'zarko, zrika omer. It already says v'zarko. It cannot be zrika. Homani mikayim v'krivu. So what is v'krivu? Zu kabbalah sadam. Great. That's. So what do you see? What do you see? That kabbalah sadam is what? Is essential. It must be done through a kohen with a klisharis. What's klisharis? Klisharis doesn't mean the klisharis that we typically talk about. It's talking about the clothing of the kohen. He has to be wearing the clothing. Omer Rebbe Kiva, I learned from another place. Minayin lekabel shleiteil b'koyin b'kli shares, b'koyin kosher or b'kli shares. Nemer kam b'nei Aroin. It says b'nei Aroin, v'nemer la'alon, elishmois b'nei Aroin, ha'koyanim ha'meshuchim, ma'alam b'koyin kosher, b'kli shares. Over there, he's talking about a koyin that's kosher, and he's wearing his clothing. I've come b'koyin kosher, b'kli shares. He's wearing the big day kohen. Omer Rebbe Tarfon. Fine. New thing. Omer Rebbe Tarfon. Akapeach es bonai. Akapach es bonai. Akapeach es bonai. It's a very, very strong lashon of I will bury my sons. Says it a few times in Shas. Why? Why is he so upset? Im lo shamati lahavchin hefresh ben kabbalah lezrika ve'en li lefarish. I wish I remembered. I know I learned once the differences between receiving the blood and throwing the blood. There's some halachic differences. I wish I knew the differences. Akapech is banai. Can't believe I can't remember it. Some sort of, not that he's cursing his sons, but if I haven't heard this, which I did, my son should be buried. So Reb Tarfon is very upset. He can't remember the differences between Kabbalah and Zrika. Omar Rebbe Kiva, says Rebbe Kiva. What's the problem? Let me figure it out for you. Ani Efarish. Not I'm going to say over what I heard from my Rebbe. I could deduce this on my own. I could figure this out. Number one, Kabbalah lo yosaba machshava kemaisa. So this is where we're trying to get to from the beginning of the sugya. And this is the line. That through Kabbalah, you cannot ruin, you can't have a machshava that ruins. You can't think to yourself, this is not a korban pesach, this is a shlamim. And that's what the Gemara started off, right? Where it says Gemara, the first words, v'kabbalah mi pasla. Could a person have bad intent during the receiving of the blood? Here it is. Finally, we get to Rebbe Kiva. Kabbalah lo yosaba machshava kemaisa. It's not like an act. You cannot have a thought, oh, this is shlamim instead of a korban pesach and ruin the korban pesach. Not for pigul and not for lishma. Nothing. Not during Kabbalah. We're going to see. Zrika. So difference number one, Rebbe Tarfon, there's a huge difference. During the Zrika, I could have the wrong intent and ruin my korban. During Kabbalah, receiving the blood, right after the Shechita, into the Kli, that I can have the wrong intent. Another halacha. Kibloi, and these are all in the Shulchan Aruch. Well, at least these coming up. Kibloi b'achutz ein chayav kares. If you were to receive the blood of a korban outside of the Beis Hamikdash, not chayav kares. Zraka b'achutz. Let's say you brought some blood home to Bet Shemesh and you decided to throw it outside on your wall in Bet Shemesh. Anush kares. You get kares for doing zrika outside of the Beis Hamikdash. That's halacha number two. Kiblu psulim ein chayavim alav. If, let's say, a person, a kohen who's pasul, decides to receive the blood, you don't get a einish. Zarku psulim, but if why? Rashi says because it has to be an avodah that's the end of the avodah. No, the last one. What's the last one? Zrika. So therefore, zarku psulim chayavim alav. If a guy's shikr, a kohen who's shikr, he's drunk and he goes to the Beis Hamikdash and he does the zrikas adam chayav. So those are the three differences. You can imagine how happy Reb Tarfon was. Omalei Reb Tarfon ha'avodah. He swears now. You just see how important the Gemara was to him, how these halachas, he was so frustrated that he doesn't remember. He says, oh, I swear that you didn't even veer right or left. It's exactly what my Rebbe told me. Ani shamati ve'en li lefarish. I heard it and I unfortunately forgot it. Ata doirish, you know how to come up with this on your own. Umaskim l'shmua, and you mamish baruch shekivanta. It's amazing, yeah. Rebbe Kiva was the greatest Tana on his own. All three halachas, boom, 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 exactly like you heard it. But lashon hazeh omar loy. And Rebbe Tarfon says exactly in this language. It's interesting. He should have said omar loy. No, but lashon hazeh mamish with these words. Akiva kol ha'poirish mimcha kepoirish mechayav. Anybody that separates from you is separating from his life. Omar Rava. Okay, so what do we have? We have a problem here. Kabbalah. When he receives the blood, could you have the wrong thought there or not? Which one is it? Oh, Omar Rava Leikashu. Kan b'machsheves pigol. When you have the thought of pigol, then it's not possible. In other words, what's pigol? Pigol is, I'm thinking in my mind here, as he's performing one of the avodas, he thinks in his mind that he is going to consume this animal, whether it's eating it physically or putting the blood on the mizbeach. He's going to do that beyond the permitted time. Typically speaking, you have to eat the carbon within 2 days. He's thinking about eating in 3-4 days from now. The zrika has to be today. He's thinking about doing the zrika tomorrow. So when he has a thought like that of pigul during the Kabbalah, that it doesn't make the carbon possible. But when he has the machshava of that this is not a carbon pesach, this is a shlamim, that ruins the carbon. That's today's sugya really. We're going to see what's going on here. Daikanami. The Ktani Shah Zevach Nifsal, our first Mishnah says that the carbon became possible. What it should say maybe, but like Tani Mispagel. If you have the wrong thought, it becomes pigel, a thought of pigel. Shema, no, we're only talking about the thought of ruining the carbon with Shaloi L'Shma, not a thought of pigel. Ask the Gemara, whoa, Umachsheves pigel le'pasla b'Kabbalah. I don't understand something. You can't have a thought that you're going to consume this animal as you're receiving the blood in a vessel. You can't think that you're gonna consume it in 6 days from now. That's not pigul. And if somebody eats it, it's not chayv kares. I would think that his bad thought of pigul is during the throwing of the blood on the mizbeach, the main avodah. How do I know the other two things? All the avodas that bring to eating, and one of them is Kabbalah. Shchita, Kabbalah, Zrika. In all these avodas, you can have the machshav of pigul. Maybe I'll think Shvichas Shirayim ve'achtor simurim. Let me show you Shvichas Shirayim. This is gewaldic. The new technology is just unbelievable. The leftover blood goes in one of those holes on the yisoid of the mizbeach. It's called the bottom part. There's like a step on the bottom. That's where it goes in. And haktora simurim. Haktora simurim is where you bring the parts of whatever the parts go on the mizbeach. Certain oil, for instance, the whole thing goes up onto the mizbeach. You have to take it, bring it up the ramp, put it on the fire. So chatas, certain parts go on, certain parts you eat. So that's also eating in a way, right? You're pouring the blood on the side of the mizbeach. So how do I know? Maybe these are also considered avodas shirayim. Yeah, it's not one of the 4 avodas, but it's pouring the blood. It's putting the food on top of the mizbeach. Take a look over here. We're going to see this pasuk tomorrow also. This is the pasuk of pigul. Are you allowed to eat it on the 3rd day after shechita? Absolutely not. There is no carbon like that. Some carbonis it's only 1 day, some 2 days. But bayom shlishi is for sure noisar. It's already too late. And then it says the word pigul. So, why does the Torah pick, so to speak, on the word, on the concept of zrika? To make a hekesh to say these are similar. It's one of the 4 avodas, but if you don't do zrika, you don't get a kapara. So too, all avodas, there have to be those that if you don't do them, there's no kapara. Guess what? If you don't put the flesh, the basar on top of the mizbeach, or you don't pour the blood in that place over there, you still get a kapara. The kapara is right after the zrika, daf, yud gimel, Amud Beis. There are 2 conditions when it comes to pigul. Again, what's pigul? Pigul is, as the kohen is performing the avodas, he thinks in his mind, I am going to take this meat home and eat it in a barbecue that I'm doing on Chalamayit Sukkos. That's That's for sure asur. Or another thought, I am going to throw the blood of this carbon tomorrow, not today. So there's two conditions. First of all, okay, I'm not going to tell you this other thing, we'll wait later. There's two conditions. Number one, it needs to be done with one of the four avodas. That's what we just discussed. It can't be shirayim, it can't be aktar. One of the four main avodas: shchita, kabbalah, hilacha, and zrika. That's condition number one. Condition number two is it must be a thought of achila. Okay? What is he thinking that he's going to do in 3 days? Something that has to do with consumption. Consuming it, either physically eating the steak, or pouring the blood on the mizbeach, which is the mizbeach is eating the blood. It's like giving the blood to the mizbeach. Okay? So here are all the things that you could think about. We just mentioned shvichas shirayim, but guess what? You cannot do it during shvichas shirayim, but you could think about shvichas shirayim because that's a type of consumption. We just spoke about aktar simurim, that it doesn't apply in aktar simurim. No. It has to happen when? During one of the four avodas in condition number one, but you could think about, during zrika, you think about, I am going to do aktar simurim tomorrow, and that's pigul. Or, I am going to eat the meat tomorrow. Knowing that, let's take a look at this. I am doing shchita, and I think to myself, I'm going to do the Kabbalah Saddam tomorrow. Is that pigul or not pigul? The answer is, you're right, it's not pigul. Why is it not pigul? Condition number one we met. What's condition number one? That's during shchita. It's one of the four avodas. But what was his thought? His thought was about, I'm going to do Kabbalah Saddam tomorrow. Let's see if that fits into this list over here. In condition number two. Does anybody see Kabbalah over there? No. Why don't you see Kabbalah there? Because Kabbalah is not a type of eating. Kabbalah is nothing. It is not eating. It's receiving the food on your tray. Zrika is to feed the mizbeach. Achilas basar is eating. Okay, so we did that one. What about this one right over here? During Kabbalah, which is not eating, he's thinking about pouring the shirayim on the mizbeach tomorrow. Is this pigul or not pigul? Rabbi Isai? Yes. Why? Because it meets condition number one, that it's during Kabbalah, and it meets condition number two, that it's an achila, givaldik. One more case. In middle, while he's pouring the shirayim on the mizbeach, he's thinking that he's going to do, he's going to be mefagel. He's going to do the aktar simurim tomorrow. Is that pigul? No. Why? Because aktaris, the shvichas shirayim is not one of the four avodas. Okay. Now that we know all this, now it's very pashut. Daf Yud Gimel on Beis Top. When he says, I'm going to do a shchita, which is condition number one is good, he missed the condition number two, because Kabbalah Saddam is not one of the conditions. It's not achila. And therefore, doesn't passel. Oh, you're asking me a contradiction. But listen what the Gemara is doing here. They're both Kabbalah Saddam. Both of them have the Kabbalah Saddam. One of them, the Kabbalah Saddam, is in the second condition. And one of them, the Kabbalah Saddam, is in the first condition. So when Kabbalah Saddam is in the second condition, you don't do the condition. The condition is that it has to be an achila. Kabbalah is not an achila. So what if you mention the word Kabbalah there? Oh, over here, the second one is Mikabel Dama. That is one of the first. That's the condition number one. That's one of the four avodas. And over here, you also, condition number two is shvichas shirayim, which is an achila, and memela it passes. I don't understand something. You just told me that the last two things, pouring the blood on the bottom of the mizbeach and then bringing up the meat to the mizbeach, over there you cannot think about pigul. But now we learned, I would think that it's only thinking about eating meat. That's also considered like eating. Why does the Torah say twice? Say yachel. There's two types of eating. Oh, and this explains everything that we discussed for a few days already. What does it mean, two types of eating? There's a human consumption, eating steak, having a barbecue. We'll see that throughout Kachim. There's something called that the Mizbeach eats. Eat. We had the other day, like you give it, huh? Video. Remember the guy pushing the desserts up the Mizbeach? We're feeding the Mizbeach, he's eating the Mizbeach. So to speak, like Ki'ilu Kaviyachal, giving the Rebbeinu Shalom food, that's maybe a little too much. Fine. So you see in the pasuk, oh, it's a problem. Like Kasha. You're saying that what? That even Shirayim and Aktar Simurim is considered Achila. Like Kasha. When is it possible? He's doing an avodah of Zrika. And he's doing it in order to do the Shirayim tomorrow, which is Pigul. But if he's doing the avodah of Shirayim, which is not an avodah, that's not a problem. Shomati, because of all these nigunim and kol hashrotzim, this and that, every time I say the word shomati, I want to start singing. You could sing it if you want. Shomati shetvilas etzba mefageles bechatas pnimis. Oh, what's tvilas etzba? Here we go. Rabbi Isa here. This is inside the heichal. Even in the Kodesh HaKadoshim you have to go, but inside the heichal. You go in there. Once you go in there, you're not throwing the blood like you typically do with the kli. The kohen sticks his finger into the kli with, like we just saw, and does achas. Okay, that thing. So the question is sticking his finger into the blood, is it one of the avodas? For that's the way to do it. So Mamela, if it is an avodah, I could think a bad thought in my mind. I could say this is not a chatas pnimi. This is a shlamim, and I ruin it. Throw it in the garbage. Start all over again. So says Rabbi Yehuda Bereder Reb Chia, that's one of the twins, yeah? Reb Chia had twins. Shamati shetfilas etzba mfagels b'chatas pnimis. You could think a machshava of pigul in your mind while he's sticking his finger into the blood, because that's one of the avodas. Shama Ilfa. Ilfa heard this. Amar Kamei de Rapada. He heard both of them are Talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan, and he said, "Oh, you heard what he said? Omar klum lamanu pigul el shlamim." Wait a minute. Where do the whole idea of pigul we learn from shlamim? Ma shlamim mean tvilas etzba fagalzman, but there is no sticking your finger in blood when it comes to shlamim. Shlamim is regular. You take the blood and you toss it. It can't be. Says the Gemara. New halacha. Learning new halachas every day. We're introduction to kachim. Pigul is super sensitive. That's what you need to remember. It's very, very sensitive. The only way pigul works is if it's by itself. He's a loner. Pigul is a loner. If you introduce any other thought to the pigul thought, it's not pigul. Okay, it has to be its own thought. So, if you're in the middle of doing, you're middle of doing a chatos, and as you're doing the chatos, you think to yourself, oh, I'm gonna eat the steak of this chatos in 6 days from now. That's pigul. And at the same time, you think to yourself, I'm gonna also make this a shlamim, not a chatos. It's not pigul. Why? Because you had two bad thoughts. Two bad thoughts is zero thoughts. So says the Gemara, so is it considered a second thought? I'm bringing shlamim. I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to eat the shlamim next year. I'm putting it in the freezer now. I'm going to eat it in a year. That's pigul. At the same time, it's thinking it's not shlamim, it's a chatos. Is it pigul or not pigul? If you have two bad thoughts, it's zero. No pigul. So if you're doing shlamim and you're thinking about pigul, but also that it's not a shlamim, it's a carbon taida, it doesn't ruin it 100%. You have to bring another carbon. It doesn't ruin it. You continue bringing them back. So memela afchata shaloi l'shma. So tell me, if I'm going to learn from shlamim, so learn the same thing by chatas. That a person brought a chatas and he's thinking himself pigul. Plus that it's not a chatas, it's a carbon taida. A moitzi midei pigul. So The bad thought is not a bad thought because Shalei Lishma is not a bad thought. So you're going to tell me this bad thought, Shalei Lishma, is not a bad enough thought to make it out of Pigel? Of course it's a bad thought. For Chatas it is a bad thought, but if I'm going to learn from Shlomim, it has to be exactly the same as Shlomim. And for Shlomim it's not a bad thought, so it won't be a bad thought for Chatas. So what if it's for... That's exactly the question. For Chaz, a bad thought, it can't be that's the answer.
We know it is.
And we know it is. It can't be. We know it is. It's the same thing, right? So, Memela, we got to do something else here. You know, we're not going to learn this idea of Pigel from Shlom. We're going to learn from some other limud. Okay. I heard in this attic that if I stick my finger into the blood and I think a bad thought of Pigel, it's going to ruin the carbon. Why? Because sticking my finger in the blood is actually one of the avodas. Let's keep on going. The same question, Rabbi Boys, same question. How's it possible? The only way I know Pigel is from Shlomim. If I'm learning from Shlomim, there is no such thing as Tfilas Etzba. Says Gemara, you think you're learning every single halacha from Shlomim? We just said, if you have the thought of bringing another carbon, it doesn't ruin the Pigel. Pigel continues. So too by Chatos. Every halacha we learn from Shlomim. The idea of the wrong thought of eating the steak outside of Yerushalayim makes the Shlomim possible. And the same thing that basically is similar, thinking about the wrong thought by a Chatas, thinking that it's something else. What do you put here? That's the Shlomim. So if you have two bad thoughts, it's not Pigel. What's the difference? This thought, that thought, the idea is a bad thought. A bad thought by Shlomim, it's not a real Pigel because you have to have a pure thought of Pigel. So too, a bad thought by Chatas. Okay, so it's a different bad thought. It's the thought that it's not a Chatas, it's a Shlomim. It's called Shalei Lishma, not Pigel, but it's a bad thought, and therefore it's not Pigel. But the answer is right there on the side. When you're talking about chutzlam kaimai by shlamim, every carbon in the world, if you think about that, I'm going to eat it outside of the right place, that makes it possible. But Shalei L'Shema is different. Why? There's only two karbanos, and we saw one man that says three by Hashem also, or Oila, but the point is, most karbanos don't have this problem, Shalei L'Shema, only Chadas and Beza. So what are you going to say? If you think about a machshava that passes it, then that added machshava, as the second machshava, makes Pigel go away, because Pigel has to be by itself. And if you do something that it's one of the four avodas, it's ma'akiv, you need the four avodas, shchita, kabbalah, elach, zrika, that brings it to Pigel. We're talking about tfilas etzba here. What is ma'akiv? If you don't do it, it's no good. If you don't do tfilas etzba, it's not good. So you could do Pigel during that time. A person does kmitza, puts his fingers into the flour, goes like this, and he thinks during that this is gonna I'm bringing this tomorrow onto the mizbeach. Pigel. Puts it into the vessel, into the second kli sharis, and he brings it to all of the mizbeach. So this we had the Rashi the other day, right? When you go like that, that resembles, that corresponds is the word. Corresponds to shchita. Moilech, when you walk it, the kmitza all the way to mizbeach, I know moilech, that's like doing it with the blood. Makdir, when you throw this flour onto the mizbeach, I know zayrik. Elanoizim bekli ma'niu. What avoida is it when you take this kmitza and put it into a vessel? It's like receiving the blood. Well, what connection is it? The blood sprays out of the neck, and you just have to stand there. Over here, you have to put it in. What's the pshat? It's much like we were just saying, but with tfilas etzba. If you don't do it, then you weren't yaitza. Al karchan avodah chashuvi. Since it needs to get done, then it's considered an avodah. They could have a bad thought in there. So too by the finger. Al karchan hainu elacha. Since if you don't put the kohen doesn't put his finger into the blood, he's not going to be yaitza. Therefore, it's like hoilacha. It's one of the avodas. So the Gemara, and that's the secret. The Gemara wanted to say that Tefillah says was like one of the avodas called hoilacha, not stam an avodah. When you get the kmitza, you put it into the vessel, it's similar to receiving of the blood. Like we said before, the question was, but he's not doing it, he's by the kmitza, he's doing it by himself. There's human intervention. By the other one, but the blood is spraying out, he's just holding the kli there. Says Gemara, what's the difference? At the end of the day, you got to put in the kli. What's the difference if he did it himself or it happened by itself? Rabbi Sai, have a wonderful day.
Merit the schus of spreading Torah throughout the world. Sponsor a shir today. MDYsponsor.com or sponsor at MDYDaf.com.